going a little bit late today. So much great momentum. If everybody could take their seats, we're about to get started. I want to highlight that we are running a little bit late with getting started, and so I'm hoping we can just respect all of the amazing speakers we have today as they come up here to give their remarks. Good morning, good afternoon. It is afternoon, apologies. All right. Welcome. My name is Erin Simon. I am the Vice President and Head of Plastic Waste and Business here at World Wildlife Fund US. It is an incredible honor to be able to welcome you all to this high ambition briefing, really focused on a global treaty to address one of the most pressing issues facing our planet today, which is plastic pollution. Our goal today is to identify what we actually mean when we talk about ambition, and to highlight those concrete solutions that are going to help us to get there. How do we truly address elimination, reduction, regulation, and remediation? The importance of this gathering in Paris cannot be underestimated. Our conversations this week are going to be instrumental in shaping the first draft of the treaty, we hope, and ultimately will determine whether or not we're able to continue with that accelerated timeline to 2024. Together, we not only have the opportunity, but we have the responsibility to make a real difference. For the future of people and wildlife and the planet, we must deliver a transformative, ambitious global treaty to end plastic pollution. And I'm really excited to see the packed room that we have here today, and so grateful for everyone who is joining us via live stream. It is a great testament of how much momentum and passion is in the room and is an energy behind this treaty. As we get into our exciting program, I want to highlight that we have a few housekeeping notes. This event is live streamed, photographed, and recorded. If you are using an interpretation device, I hope that it is working. Please confirm if you have a thumbs up from anyone in the audience that's using one. Yes? No? No thumbs up. But if you have a problem, feel free to raise your hand. Somebody will assist you immediately. We want to make sure you're able to hear all of the remarks. And now, it is my great honor to introduce our first speaker for opening remarks, Ms. Inger Andersen, the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program. Ms. Andersen has more than 30 years' experience. I just had to keep fawning over her. In international development, economics, and environmental sustainability. Please come to the stage.
All right, well, thank you, and what a great pleasure. It is huge thank you to WWF for being co-convener, and a big, big thank you to Her Excellency, Dr. Jeanne d'Arc Maria. It's a pleasure, there she is, and of course to His Excellency, known by all who are at UNEA 5, Espen Eide, Minister of Climate, and Jeanne d'Arc, Minister of Environment. Both of these two people have been absolutely instrumental in getting us to where we are today. Jeanne d'Arc and her country was the first in Africa to introduce a ban on single-use plastics back in 2008. Many countries have subsequently followed, but it's extraordinary what this country has done. And today in Rwanda, you will find a lot of innovation around alternatives and packaging and bamboo and all kinds of things. Go check it out one day when you visit next. And Minister Eide, if you don't know, and you weren't in the room that moment when the gavel went down, it was in large part many of the folks who are present here who helped us get to that moment. And so we should recognize that as well. But under your steer, we landed this pathway on which we now are on. And so this meeting here in Paris is instrumental because this is the second meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee that you know, and it is really the time now where we will set the stage of ambition, the stage for success, the stage of detail of this agreement that we are intent on hammering out. Now, some say this cannot be done in 2 years. I say, of course it can, because the world is waiting and the world is wanting this. And let us not forget that part of the reason why politicians listened up was because the voters told them so. Frankly, people are disgusted by the plastic that washes in on their shores, that they find in the streets, that they know is in their food, that they know it's in their bodies. This is not the future we want. So what does ambition then look like? Well, to me, and I know that I'm not the negotiator, but let me try to paint it what I think it looks like. Ambition is redesigning to reduce plastic in products, and that could be done through many ways, including thinking the product itself, deliquidification of the products that today we want in liquid form. God alone knows why, because you can get them in solid form or in powdered form just as well. Ambition is making it easier to repair, to reuse, to refill, and to recycle, so that circularity becomes possible or use becomes unnecessary. Ambition is providing incentives to make recycled polymers significantly cheaper than virgin plastic polymers. Ambition is backing research and development on sustainable plastic alternatives. And ambition is building waste management. I live in Kenya, and those who have had the chance to go and visit a very large garbage dump in Kenya called Dandora, and I'm afraid that these are replicated across the global south, will know that this is not something we can recycle our way out of. So we have to invest in waste management infrastructure that can cope with the load, be it organic, be it otherwise, and that is critical. Ambition is creating new jobs, new markets, and new business opportunities. And ambition is creating a just transition so that those which have now learned in Sri Lanka, they call the green force, not waste pickers, the green force, that waste pickers, those informal waste workers and other vulnerable communities, that they can have decent jobs and have a safe and healthy environment. And ambition is ensuring that legacy plastic that washes up on the shores of that island nation for decades after we have turned off the plastic tap, that they are not having to clean up those beaches in perpetuity, that others will step up and make that funding available. So ambition is a precise, a defined, legally binding instrument that shows solidarity, that provides the financial resources for the global south, that deals with legacy plastics that washes up on the shores every minute across the world. That is what ambition looks like. And that is what this deal needs to help deliver. So what can each key group do to get us there? Well, let's begin with the member states. Obviously, they can agree on obligations. They can agree on control measures. They can agree also on voluntary approaches that address the full life cycle of plastic. Let me remind you that this is not the first time we are having to tackle a complex problem. We knew back in the 70s that ozone was depleting that HFCs and CFCs were depleting the ozone layer. We understood that we need to take action. Industry said, that's impossible. You need your air conditioners and your refrigerants. Can't be done. Fire retardants, it's the only way. And yet the world came together and said, actually, we're going to exit this stuff. Like it or not like it. Industry was inside the conversation, and you know what? Very, very quickly they found alternatives that do not have those properties of depleting the ozone layer, so the industry can step up and can find ways. And that is why governments need not be afraid of speaking out on the ambition, because by having control measures and obligations, we can incentivize the private sector and they can be part and parcel of driving the just transition, empowering consumers with plastic-free products, or at least making sure that we know what are the chemicals in these plastics, so that when we need to recycle, we can do those. We can do that. And all of this has to be backed by means of implementation, a mechanism that allows for ratcheting up of commitments. Yes, and provisions that incentivize market shifts. We need to get out of all that virgin plastic that are pouring into our markets and make that more scarce or more expensive or somehow less desirable than recycled plastic. That is one of the dimensions that the treaty needs to find a way, the treaty negotiations need to find a way of dealing with. 2, what does industry and private sector need to do? Well, the business coalition will give its input into the negotiations, and that's really important. That could be very, very valuable for shaping an approach to the business environment. You may have seen Paul Pullman's op-ed just a couple of days ago. It's a searing piece of insight from an extremely experienced business leaders. Amongst others, he says, an effective and enforceable set of global rules and responsibilities will be vastly better for everyone. Why? Because it will set a common denominator, a level playing field. But recommendations alone don't make for ambition. Ambition is for the private sector in acting now, in stepping up. Don't sit back and wait for the rules to be there. Be that early bird, be that one that forces change, because change is coming. Redesigning the products, obviously, so that they use less plastic, redesigning the products for reuse, redesigning the products for recycling. There is a profit in plastic, and there is also a profit in alternatives. So let us not hold on to the old that we know we need to let go of, but let us find a way of embracing the new. The difference is that we can make this new way pay dividends without polluting our ecosystems, without harming human health, and without warming the planet. So that's what business can do. What can then the civil society, the science, and other stakeholders do? Well, first of all, don't keep quiet. Keep making that noise. Part of that was how we landed at UNEA. And so that broad community has been very critical for us, and so please keep pushing. But drive ambition in the negotiations by providing science and insight, by understanding that you too are dependent on this material. I stand with a podium made of plastic, it seems. I mean, it is everywhere. You've touched it 1,000 times today when you got onto the metro, when you sat in a car, if you did, when you leaned on a wall that had plastic paint, whatever you did, when you brushed your teeth, you may have not used your bamboo toothbrush. And so the thing is that you have already touched it 1,000 times. So it is a material that we live with and that we will probably need to continue living with. Think medical plastic, think aviation, think cars, think electrical appliances, think electrical in buildings. So how then can we drive ambition with the understanding of what it is that we need to do for the single-use plastic as well as for the multiple-use plastic? All of this needs to be part of it. And for consumers, I don't want to make the burden and place the burden on consumers because obviously it's a system shift, but each one of us have choices we can make. We can refuse plastic, we can demand things in our stores, and we understand that we can make choices with our euros, our Kenyan shillings, or whatever currency we're using. So consumer education is critical. So friends, we're in this together, and ambition is, above all, a unity of purpose. The right outcome from INC-2 will move this deal down the road. A mandate we need for a zero draft will take us one step further of putting ink to the paper. The options paper is there, but now we would like to see a mandate given to the chair for a zero draft. And that zero draft can then form the basis of negotiations at INC-3 and be further refined as inputs are provided in INC-4 and 5. The global community is demanding that negotiators get this deal done, get it done now, get it done on time, get it done with ambition, and get it done by the end of 2024. But again, I ask every stakeholder to do what they can right now, because procrastination is not ambition, but firm and immediate action is. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words, Ms. Anderson. All right, we will now hear from our co-chairs for the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution as they introduce a ministerial declaration. So I'd like to welcome to the stage the Honorable Dr. Jean d'Arc Mujawamaria, the Minister of Environment for Rwanda, and of course, the Honorable Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Climate and Environment for Norway, who holds the responsibility for the government's policies in climate and environment. Please come to the stage.
Excellencies, ministers, distinguished guests, friends of the environment, good afternoon. Bon après-midi. As the co-chair of High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution, alongside with my colleague and friend, Minister Espen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you or to this High Ambition briefing event ahead of the second UN negotiation meeting for a global treaty to end plastic pollution. To everyone joining us online, bienvenue. We are now more than 1 year into negotiations since the historic decision to develop a global plastic treaty was adopted at the UN Environment Assembly in Nairobi last year. However, since then, more than 400 million tons of new plastic have been produced, and another 22 million tons of plastic waste has ended up in nature. The plastic waste crisis is showing no signs of slowing down. That is why we need to move quickly into treaty-making mode so we have sufficient time to develop an agreement that will end plastic pollution from all sources and protect human health and our environment. 53 ministers in the High Ambition Coalition have developed a joint ministerial statement that calls for legally binding provisions on a number of crucial elements. I am pleased to share some of them with you today. We are calling for binding provisions to reduce and restrain the production and consumption of primary plastic polymers. Plastic consumption has quadrupled over the past 30 years, and plastic production is expected to double over the next 20 years. The world will not be able to manage this volume of plastic waste if nothing is done now. Indeed, we are not even able to manage the plastic waste we are producing today. The coalition is also calling for binding provisions to eliminate and restrict unnecessary, avoidable, and problematic plastic polymers and associated chemicals. More than 13,000 chemicals are currently used in plastic production, of which 3,400 are considered to be of concern due to their hazardous properties. Women, children, and infants are particularly impacted by harmful chemicals, while workers and residents of frontline communities are exposed to unacceptably high levels of toxic chemicals from plastics manufacturing. Further down the line, waste pickers and their families are also exposed to toxic chemicals. We have a responsibility to protect human health and our environment from the most harmful polymers and chemicals of concern through the treaty. We are also calling for a ban on problematic plastics products, particularly those that have a high risk of ending up in nature. My country, Rwanda, started this journey in 2004 when we first banned plastic carry bags. Then in 2008, the law came out to ban plastic carry bags. In 2019, we introduced a ban on all single-use plastic. While implementation and enforcement are ongoing, we are already seeing the positive social, economic, and environmental benefits of banning problematic plastics that are likely to end up as pollution in nature. Rwanda's experience and that of many other nations demonstrates that reducing and restraining the production and consumption of plastic is possible. Protecting our health and our environment from plastic pollution is in our hands, but we must act quickly and with ambition. The solution is a legally binding treaty that is ambitious and effective. We must live up to the expectations of people in all corners of the world who are counting on us to protect their future. As I speak, tons of plastics are being produced and tons of plastic waste is being generated with no hope of being disposed of in an environmentally sound manner. This has to end. If we delay in the negotiations, we run the risk of missing the opportunity to create the world's next truly successful treaty that can improve the lives of all living things on planet Earth. We cannot afford to fail. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the members of High Ambition Coalition to end plastic pollution for the commitment and determination. With that, I hand over to my colleague and friend Espen to take us through the other element of the coalition joint statement. Let us together end plastic pollution by 2040, and together we can. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Mujava Maria, my dear sister Jeanne d'Arc. It's such an honor to work with you, and I commend yours and your country, Rwanda's strong leadership in this. And I'm so happy also for the work that we're doing with all the countries and all the ministers, many of them present here, who are part of the High Ambition Coalition. And I should also say that this meeting in this splendid hall is co-organized with, of course, the World Wildlife Fund, the WWF. Thank you for your very serious efforts over all these many years. That strong voice has been a major impulse behind why we are here in the first place. and also the Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty and the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty. The four of us are the joint organizers of this event. And I'm thrilled by where we are. We are now going into INC-2 in the coming week in Paris, but we wanted this meeting today to try to remind ourselves of the spirit of Nairobi and what is actually said in the mandate, which is a very solid and strong mandate for what the negotiations are about, and also all that has happened since. Because what happens when we set each other, when we set high goals and we expect each other to deliver on those goals, we start reflecting on what is needed, what is the knowledge, the science that is still necessary, and we start thinking about how it can be applied. And then we realize that in order to reach these goals, we have to do maybe even more than we originally thought. So the process itself is an iterative process where setting goals, learning about how to achieve them, getting a better understanding of the drama of not fulfilling these goals, all come together and raise the bar and take us to a higher level of collaboration. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I am really happy about what we managed to produce together in the High Ambition Coalition. And I really hope that we will all do our utmost to let that inspire the work of the actual negotiating process. And I would also like to underline, as was said by others, and I'm sure we will be hearing in the coming week as well, but the plastic challenge is actually an integral part of all the three planetary crises. Obviously pollution, that goes without saying, because it's a key part of the pollution challenge, but it's also part of the climate challenge. So we should also have a view to what is happening in the Paris Treaty and the further development, also with a very promising upcoming COP in Dubai this autumn, and the recently adopted Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which also is very important for our work, because the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the pollution crisis comes together, and plastics is part of all of them, and solving the plastic challenge is also a part of all of them. Let me just say, as I think we should, that recognizing the paramount importance of stopping plastic waste, this is not an alliance to combat plastic as such. We realize that there will be products that will still be made by plastics. We realize that that can be done in a much sounder way than today, but we do also recognize that we will have to substitute plastics in certain products. We have to come to an end with the use of single-use plastics. We have to think about reusability, recyclability, and in order to do that, we also have to look at the product design, because that plastic that shall still be used will need to be designed from the start in such a way that recycling, that reuse, and later, if necessary, recycling is possible and sound and healthy. So we also will have to work with the recycling process, because there are different ways of doing that, and some are better than others, to put it in that way. And these issues are essential to the work that we're going to do in the coming weeks, and these are issues that we are eager to put high on the agenda. We have been very clear in the ministerial statement that the treaty should include science-based targets that will support the transition to a more circular economy and guide financial flows towards solutions throughout the life cycle of plastics, such as investments in circular product design, reuse, and recycling. We also call in the ministerial statement for binding provisions in the treaty in order to ensure transparency in the production of plastics and the use of chemicals, as well as traceability and labeling for plastic products to ensure sustained accountability throughout the value chain. This is to protect the environment as well as human health, and all stakeholders need to understand what is in their plastic product, what they are exposed to, what they are producing, what they are using, and how it can be used safely. Even with strong measures to reduce and reuse plastics, we will continue to generate plastic waste. This plastic waste must be kept out of the environment. The High Ambition Coalition, therefore, is calling for provisions to manage plastic waste in an environmentally sound and safe manner and to eliminate the release of plastic to nature. These are some of the issues that our negotiators will discuss in the coming week. And as my good friend and co-chair mentioned, we have no time to waste, and we need to move into treaty-making mode. This is also why we are saying that in this INC-2, one of the outcomes we can strive for is an agreement to come up with a draft treaty, a zero draft, a text that we can start work on in time for INC-3. I think, to be frank, that is paramount if we are to stay with the very ambitious timeline that we very consciously set when we were in Nairobi, when we said that we want to take this to port by next year. We really need to get into the draft text mode, otherwise we will not get there in time. So happy for the broad engagement from, of course, the civil society, from the scientists, from all the people that contribute, but also from the voice of civil society, but also the voice of business. And I want to underline that in meetings, even today, and in many of the meetings that we have been having with very engaged business representatives, we keep hearing that they want a level playing field. They want to make sure that the front runners are not kept back by laggards. It's easier to be ahead when they know what's coming, that rules are coming. As Inger Andersen so ably said, that in order to be a leader, you can bet on rules being clearer, firmer, more environmentally friendly, without anybody competing you out from the laggards side. So I think this is an important message that we should listen to and understand as we design our important work. So the High Ambition Coalition's vision is to end plastic pollution by 2040, and this is now shared by an increasing number of countries also outside of this particular group. And I was very happy, and I have to congratulate the Japanese chair on G7 and all the members of the G7 group this very weekend, last weekend, that came up with strong language on plastics that I think was a very good impetus and a very good reminder of the standard that many countries are now referring to. And I encourage those of you who haven't read the statement actually to do that as well. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. We are very happy that this group has been growing. We are very satisfied by the level of ambition. We're satisfied by the dedication by so many of you. We're very satisfied, Minister Mujava Maria and myself, for all the people who help us in this work. And I want to thank, without mentioning names, I want to thank all the people that actually work on this, the Rwandan team, Norwegian team, and all the teams of the countries that are on board in the work that we've been doing. And thank you for staying with us. Thank you for coming here, and a really, really good meeting in the INC-2. I have great expectations. Let's make sure they are fulfilled. Thank you for the attention.
All right, we're now going to hear from a series of stakeholders. We are fortunate to have representatives from government, business, scientists, civil society, and youth here in the room with us today. First, I'd like to bring to the stage the first half of our government speaker lineup. So we're going to have 2 sets of 3 speakers. I'm going to call your names and have you come on up and go ahead and speak in that order. And so to react to the ministerial declaration and to share their goals for the next few weeks of negotiations. So please welcome to the stage the Honorable Sir Moulin Joseph, Minister of Health, who has been a significant government leader in Antigua and Barbuda for 35 years, and who has served in the government of Antigua and Barbuda as Minister of Health, Wellness, and Environment since 2014. Come on to the stage. The Honorable Rebecca Powell. The Honorable Rebecca Powell, Parliamentary Undersecretary of State and Minister of Environment and Equality in the United Kingdom, with responsibilities including resources and waste, environmental regulation, including chemicals, air quality, noise, and water. Welcome. And of course, the Honorable Takeshi Akahori, Assistant Minister, Ambassador of Global Issues for Japan. All right, welcome to the stage. Sir Mullen, you can begin. Thank you so much.
Excellencies, members of the High Ambition Coalition, it's indeed an honor for me to make these remarks on behalf of Antigua and Barbuda. I am pleased to meet everyone in Paris, where we embarked on the second leg of this journey to end plastic pollution. My delegation looks forward to working with you in the spirit of cooperation towards completing the work of the INC by the intended date of 2004. I must declare that I'm here in Paris, having been part of the World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland. And as I sat and listened to the previous speakers, I realized the important link between the pollution and the health of our people. The issue of plastic pollution should not be deemed only a concern, but one that requires extensive action, especially considering how small island developing states such as mine are most affected by this plague, for which small island developing states contribute very little. As is in the case of climate change, we saw small islands continue to carry the burden of the fallout of climate change, but are not responsible for the vast majority of pollution in the atmosphere. Given our vulnerability to environmental threats and distinct geographical circumstances, plastic pollution puts an added strain on our limited waste management capacity, which is stretched to the limits. It affects our economies, our livelihoods, health, and environment, including our cultural ties to the marine environment. So while we are grateful for the common collective concern which brings us together here as one of the island states, members of this coalition should be reminded that we have a very small window to address and arrest the severe damage that is being done by plastics, not only to the environment, but to human health. The fish that consume microplastics, the same fish ends up on the plates of our citizens. I posit that high ambition can look this way. We need to first close the tap by addressing the unsustainable sourcing and extraction of raw materials to make plastics, along with devising strategies to reduce global plastic production to more sustainable levels. The concept of the circularity and sustainability must be integral in establishing design standards and criteria for new and existing products. We need to rely on sound science, information, data, and technology to work towards developing targets for the inclusion of recycled content in new products and alternatives to be used as substitutions. To this end, we need to work toward a progressive elimination of the problematic polymers, chemicals, and additives which pose risks to human health and the environment. In identifying the materials to be managed on the global plastics regime, we need to establish safe alternatives. We wish to promote synergies with the existing agreements such as the Basel Convention and the Transboundary Movement of Waste, as well as the Cartagena Convention that addresses the protection of marine environment to the wider Caribbean region. We must target the most problematic, unnecessary, unavoidable plastic products, including marine plastic litter and microplastics. The criteria to identify these projects must include a minimum products with the highest propensity to become plastic pollutants or which otherwise pose risk of adverse effects. States must progressively work toward a globally harmonized system for labeling products, particularly including the disclosure of their contents to enable consumer choice, as well as the means of preventing leakage, especially in the context of developing countries and SIDS. There must be a concerted global effort to boost the collection, sorting, recycling, and disposal of both recyclable and non-recyclable plastic waste. And finally, the journey to end plastic pollution must include the remediation of legacy plastic pollution in the marine environment, which affects SIDS, global health, and biodiversity. And however, as we issue the call for the highest possible level of ambition in Global Plastic Treaty, we all must be prepared to be just as assertive in our calls for effective and robust provisions to ensure the participation of and implementation by developed countries and SIDS. In building the financial mechanism, we require new, additional, adequate, and predictable means of implementation under the instrument with specific support provisions of SIDS, including priority access. The plastic pollution problem is universal, but our national circumstances and domestic contents are unique to us. We owe it to our current and future generations, many of whom are not here, to leave a nation, a world, no less polluted than we have inherited. Let me remind that in the discussion, from my experience, Antigua and Barbuda being the first island state in the Caribbean to eliminate single-use plastics in 2016, that we have learned a few lessons. We must integrate the energy, the imagination of a young people. We started 2 years ago to recycle the PET plastics. And in 1.5 years, the young people, the families, collected over 9 million bottles of plastic in Antigua and Barbuda, with a population of just under 100,000. And much of that collection was done by primary school children. We need to use the leverage of their enthusiasm. We need to educate them. I end you by saying we need plastic pollution literacy in all societies. I thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's a real honour to follow the honourable friend from Antigua and Barbuda, and what great lessons to be learnt about your eliminating the single-use plastics. And I just wanted to say initially thank you so much to our honourable co-chairs, of the High Ambition Coalition, the Environment Minister from Rwanda and the Climate and Environment Minister of Norway. And I was thinking about this. They are both some way apart in miles and kilometres, but so close in their ambition on plastics. And I think we're really lucky to have your strong voices heading up this coalition. So well done for that. And I also wanted to thank WWF, of course, for their role in this, and the Business and Scientists Coalition for bringing us all here today. And for me, it is a great honour to be part of this, representing our nation. And we've obviously all got a really good understanding of why tackling plastic pollution is so critical. And we know that we do need a global effort to fix the problem. I think in our heart of hearts, we know that we need to do it, but I think we also know that we can do it. I think that's the critical thing, don't you? And so many people have talked about innovation and research. You know, we're quite capable of it as a society. So I think we all know that. And the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution continues to show the power of this collaboration, you know, that has started, but look, it can really grow, can't it? And this event is really going to show that. And I'm so proud that the UK was a founding member of the coalition, and I'm really proud to reconfirm our commitment to ending plastic pollution by 2040. So this ambitious but crucial target is gaining this global recognition. And at the G7 meeting that we've already had reference to in Japan, G7 nations committed to ending plastic pollution with the ambition to reduce additional plastic pollution to zero by 2040. And the High Ambition Coalition member states' joint ministerial statement sets out the binding provisions that we want to see of all countries across the world in order to meet this target. And only binding common obligations can achieve this, supported obviously by national measures. And the statement calls for binding provisions in the treaty to eliminate and restrict unnecessary, avoidable or problematic plastics, something that the UK has been prioritising, as I know many others have. So we have been introducing measures to restrict and ban the supply of a whole range of single-use plastic items, which include straws, drink stirrers, plastic-stemmed cotton buds, with a whole lot of further measures coming in this October, which include extruded polystyrene food and drink containers. We're also bringing in a whole range of measures to transform our entire waste system to reduce waste and then encourage more recycling and reuse and refilling. But we believe that the treaty must restrain and reduce the production and consumption of primary plastic polymers to sustainable levels. We've actually introduced a tax on plastic packaging that doesn't contain, that contains less than 30% recycled content, so that we're providing a very clear economic incentive for businesses to move away from the use of virgin plastic. So next week, as a priority, we want to see a mandate agreed for the INC chair to produce a zero draft of the treaty text, which we hope will incorporate all of the elements set out in the High Ambition Coalition statement. I think this event really showcases the breadth of interest and expertise of stakeholders involved in the negotiations. I'm really pleased to see the engagement of major global business. Business is so critical to all of this. Civil society, we've already heard about how it's so important to get them involved. Youth organisations, and crucially, of course, the scientific community. And now we've all got to work together and reach out to those that are beyond our coalitions and to find the common ground that we need globally to secure the robust, ambitious treaty we need to accelerate action. And we need to bring everyone along with us, including those that either might consider themselves marginalised or undervalued and unrecognised, who actually are. And also we need to involve that the green force that was referred to earlier, waste pickers, but also we call them the green force, who handle more than half the world's plastic waste, and most of them are women. And those voices must be listened to. We like to listen to our women, don't we? So we need and we must. So let us keep up the pressure, to conclude, the pressure on that really comprehensive ambition that Inga Anderson encapsulated so well, to make sure that we keep up this really challenging timeline to conclude the treaty, working together to make the most of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to find the necessary way to accelerate the action we need across government, across society, all sectors, and indeed the whole world. Thank you.
Her Excellency Dr. Jeanne d'Arc Mujawa Maria, Minister of Environment of Rwanda, His Excellency Mr. Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Climate and the Environment of Norway, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. Please allow me to start by extending Japan's sincere gratitude to the organizers, the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution, WWF International, the Scientist Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty, and Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty. For organizing, but gathering key stakeholders, including business leaders, civil society, scientific, and youth organizations. Japan is pleased to attend this event today in Paris as a new member of the High Ambition Coalition. Thank you very much. We do so because we share the ambition of the High Ambition Coalition. Japan has been engaged in efforts to tackle challenges posed by marine plastic litter. Japan's initiative, the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, is now shared by 87 countries and regions. At the recently held G7 summit in Hiroshima, G7 leaders, including Japan, share the commitment to end plastic pollution with the ambition to reduce additional plastic pollution to zero by 2040. Thank you, Minister Eide. Thank you, Minister Powell, for recognizing this achievement. Building on such efforts, Japan would like to express its renewed determination to lead discussions to develop a new international legal instrument. We believe that a new instrument must be effective and progressive. It should be a realistic one which reflects different circumstances in each country and allows all stakeholders, including those represented by the participants to this event, to actually take actions to end plastic pollution. The instrument should allow for progressive improvement. The instrument must have mechanisms to prevent the release of plastic pollution into the environment, designed to promote a circular economy for plastics through such measures as reduce, reuse, recycle, and renewable measures that cover every stage of the plastic life cycle. Japan looks forward to engaging with ambition with fellow High Ambition Coalition members and other participants here and throughout the INC process. Let us work together. I thank you.
Thank you all so much. We've had a slight agenda change due to timing conflicts, so right now I'm going to invite to the stage the Honorable Jose Fernandez, who serves as Undersecretary of the State for Economic Growth, Energy, and Environment at the United States State Department. He leads the State Department's business and bureau offices, working with climate change, clean energy, health, supply chain security, and other U.S. priorities. Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Erin, for accommodating the schedule. Excellencies, friends, colleagues, thank you for having me today, and also let me thank you for the opportunity to share the United States perspective on this very important issue. And let me start with a clear message. Solving the plastic pollution crisis is a priority for the United States. The United States is one of the largest producers and consumers of plastic, and we're also one of the largest generators of plastic waste. We know that the world is watching our actions, and we are determined to lead by example and to be an integral part of the solution, just as we are an integral part of the problem. Domestically, we're taking a comprehensive approach to address plastic pollution by working with local governments, communities, businesses, NGOs, and other partners towards a strong national action plan. But we know that domestic actions just aren't enough. We will need a global approach, and the global agreement, we believe, is our best approach to develop one. We agree with several areas of consensus in the vision of the coalition that have been articulated today on the global agreement. Specifically, we agree on strong binding provisions, not only voluntary actions. We agree on a comprehensive, on a circular approach throughout the life cycle of plastic. We agree on a global goal, that working together to end plastic pollution by 2040, and we agree on the need to engage non-governmental stakeholders because they are vital implementers of the agreement. The hard question, of course, is we agree on these things, but how do we get there? There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Countries have different capacities, they have different infrastructure, they have different resources to deal with plastic pollution. And that's why we believe that we need an agreement that includes strong obligations and strong commitments for all countries, while at the same time providing flexibility for governments to tackle their most pressing issues. We need provisions that enable parties to increase their ambition. We need mechanisms to promote transparency and accountability so that we all stay on track. We need an agreement that takes into account the impact of marginalized communities and the informal sector in a circular plastic economy. And we need an agreement that encourages working with stakeholders to drive innovation and innovative solutions. So you will ask, what does a successful agreement look like from the perspective of the United States? Well, a successful agreement to us is a global agreement, an agreement that's inclusive, an agreement where every one of us is at the table, overcoming our differences, pushing each other to do the most that we can to save our planet. We want to inspire a race to the top. The U.S. also calls on the private sector and civil society, on academia to take ambitious and complementary actions to end plastic pollution and to help transform the use of plastic from linear to circular. We recognize that it may be difficult for countries to reach agreement on how to restrict certain types of polymers, plastic products, and chemical additives, because plastics are tailored to specific applications and they're also interwoven into our societies and into our economies. Therefore, we would like to see commitments that promote sustainable production and sustainable consumption of plastic, that increase plastic circularity, that strengthen the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, all in a manner that's protective of human health and of the environment. We believe that taken together, all of these actions will reduce the demand for plastic. In short, the United States is engaged, we're eager, and we are ready to push for an ambitious agreement. We intend to be at the table, and we intend to stay at the table until we reach an agreement that embodies our ambitions and also recognizes our differences. I believe that we can find ways to work together, and I look forward to doing so with each one of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And to continue on with our second group of government speakers, I'd like to welcome to the stage the Honorable Terry Duguid, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change from Canada, and of course, Ambassador Luis Valles Valdivieso, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ecuador, and senior diplomat with extensive experience in multilateral environmental negotiations.
Bonjour. Good afternoon, everyone, Excellencies, friends, colleagues. It's good to be with you. Je suis heureux de me joindre
I'm
à vous
delighted to be
aujourd'hui.
with you today.
First of all, I want to thank our two environment ministers from Norway and Rwanda for their leadership, also for inviting us to this very, very special gathering this afternoon. A shout out to the World Wildlife Fund for their leadership as well in bringing us all together. Colleagues, we are on a trajectory to tackle collectively and jointly the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and plastic pollution. These crises are interconnected, mutually reinforcing, and transboundary in nature. And this is why Canada supports ambitious solutions that are also mutually reinforcing. Let me share three reasons that drive our ambition for INC-2. First, for me and Minister Guilbeault, Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change, this fight against plastic pollution is a fight to protect the health of the environment, including wildlife and its habitats. Plastic waste and its impacts put at risk the water we drink, our security, and the health of the people we represent. Second, this plastic crisis is a waste of resources and a lost commodity. As a former city councillor in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, I know firsthand about the economic impacts of plastic waste in low-income areas, remote communities, and people living in lowland and highland areas. We want to unlock robust economic opportunities that support circularity and action on the ground, action that supports our communities. Third, the targets, goals, and control measures we set must address the full life cycle of plastics. And Canada is so pleased to support the High Ambition Coalition Member States' joint ministerial statement for INC-2. This statement reflects the ability of this group to challenge us so that we can keep our highest aspirations and translate them into action. To be a reliable global partner, we must lead by example and step up to this ambition domestically. And that's why Canada is developing a strong domestic agenda. We want to keep plastics in the economy and out of the environment. We are working with our partners, including Indigenous peoples, to implement a comprehensive and circular economy approach to reduce plastic waste, increase the value recovery of plastics, and tackle plastic pollution through a range of complementary solutions. Over the next decade, Canada's leading ban on harmful single-use plastics that's been in effect since December 20th, 2022, will result in the estimated elimination of 1.3 million tons of hard-to-recycle plastic waste and more than 22,000 tons of plastic pollution, which is the equivalent to over 1 million full garbage bags. Now, as we prepare for INC-2, we are also looking to the future, and that's why Canada would be privileged to host all of you for INC-4 in Ottawa in April 2024. As we continue to advance together with the entire international community, including with our Indigenous partners and non-governmental stakeholders, towards the development of this important agreement. We want this moment to be inclusive and ambitious, and for that to happen, we need all voices at the table, and we need action. Only 5.5 months ago, my colleague, Minister Guilbeault, worked alongside with many of you at CBD COP15 with the Chinese presidency to adopt the historic Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework. Let's continue that trajectory. Let's bring the aspirations of young people and their hope for effective and transformational multilateralism into these rooms. And as Ms. Anderson from UNEP said earlier, let's get this global agreement done. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Excellencies Minister Barth and Minister Muhawa-Maria. Your leadership and your hard work, it's amazing. Thank you very much. I would also like to welcome Japan to the High Ambition Coalition. Great that you are here with us. Ecuador is quite proud to be in the HAC, in the High Ambition Coalition. We have been from day one in the coalition, and because we have that ambition that has been mentioned here with the people that have spoken before me, we want to see an ambitious treaty, and we want to see that it is effective when we need to implement. Plastic pollution is affecting negatively, of course, to the three crises. So plastic pollution and combat plastic pollution, it is a challenge, but it's mainly a crisis that we need to combat and to eliminate. We would like and we want to see a treaty that is firmly rooted on human rights-based approach that will help us, of course, to fight against inequality of people, that will help us also to go in the right track of just transition. And of course, we want this treaty to combat effectively and protect the environment and, of course, human health. For that, we have said, and we repeat, and we will repeating, we need to see a strong, permanent, and effective contribution of the civil society, of the academia, of NGOs, and of course, of the scientific community. We need next week also to debate and to talk about how that contribution, especially of the scientific community, to get scientific information and also to work with the scientific evidence now and the future evidence and information that we will get, we need to work on that and see how that contribution will be working with us, how that contribution will help us in our negotiation. That yes, it is a member-driven negotiation, but we need to get that information and that evidence when we are going to negotiate and later on when we are going to implement the treaty. As you know, and I give you an example why we need also these strong global measures. And an example is our Galapagos Islands. Galapagos Islands that also are natural world heritage declared by UNESCO in 1978. It's a protected area in Ecuador. We are working very hard inside. We have implemented legislation to combat pollution, also to eliminate single-use plastics in the Galapagos Islands. We have legislation about circular economy. We are working also regional to protect the islands, but it's not enough. 80% of the plastic litter that comes to the islands comes from other countries, comes from other regions. It comes from with the marine, with the sea currents that also brings the wonderful mega biodiversity to the islands. Also, those sea currents bring the plastic pollution to the islands. And that's why we need the global treaty with strong measures to combat plastic pollution. It is important also that we discuss next week about how we make effective our intersectional work, how we make effective what I said before, this contribution of the scientific community, also during the intersessional work. So that will be also an important debate, and it will be important decisions we need to take next week. As it was mentioned before, yes, we would like to see the mandate of a zero draft, but that mandate has to be a good start, a good text. When it starts good, also it ends good, and we would like to see like that. What do we want, and what we have to have in mind for our negotiations next week? We need, and we have, and we must reduce production. We need to control production, and we need to close the tap. If not, it will be impossible to end plastic pollution. We also have to eliminate harmful, available, and problematic plastics, as well as the plastic polymers, dangerous chemicals, and plastic products that are of concern. Also, we want to, yes, track and increase circularity, but it has to be safe circularity of plastic in the economy, guided by the waste hierarchy. We need to eliminate the release of plastics, including microplastics, to the air and water, both marine and terrestrial. We need also to remediate plastic pollution with best available techniques and science. And also, we have to work with all these challenges, with all these mandates that we want to see it. We need also means and good means of implementation. Thank you very much.
I just want to give a great thank you to all of our government speakers for those remarks. It's quite impressive to see all of us here today, to have the spirit of international collaboration be showcased so strongly in those remarks. We're now going to hear from businesses from the Business Coalition, because as we know, the private sector holds immense influence in this space and will undoubtedly play a critical role in advocating and implementing change. Please welcome our business representatives to the stage. Ms. Rebecca Marmot, Unilever's Chief Sustainability Officer, responsible for the company's sustainability strategy and implementation globally. Unilever is also a co-chair of the Business Coalition for Global Plastics Treaty. Ms. Leanne Gale, the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Corporate Governance and Compliance and a member of the Executive Board of Nestle, based in Switzerland. She is responsible for legal and compliance matters globally and leads the human rights community within Nestle. And of course, Mr. Michael Goldsman, the Vice President of Global Policy and Sustainability for the Coca-Cola Company, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak here today. Unilever is proud to be one of the co-chairs of the Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty. The coalition also includes over 100 leading businesses from across the plastics value chain. Together, we're committed to supporting the development of an ambitious and effective, legally binding UN treaty to end plastic pollution. We find ourselves at a pivotal moment, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to set global rules to combat the truly global nature of plastics pollution. Unilever is a significant user of plastic. We use around 700,000 tons every year in our packaging. And we've set ambitious goals to tackle plastic pollution, including halving our own use of virgin plastic. We all know that that's essential. We're making good progress. We've aligned on a roadmap with other businesses in the voluntary initiatives, such as the Global Commitment. In fact, over 20% of global plastic packaging volumes are now covered by the Global Commitment, with common targets, rules, and reporting metrics. That does illustrate a shift from a significant part of the industry, but yet the remaining 80% are not playing by the same rules. It's now clear that voluntary initiatives alone won't solve the problem. While they're critical to success, policy must also play a role to end plastic pollution and support sustainable business growth. We increasingly find ourselves navigating fragmented regulations across countries, adding complexity for business without necessarily delivering the intended environmental outcomes. The treaty is a huge opportunity to change this. That's why we, as leading businesses, want a treaty with legally binding global rules and measurements to drive change on a global scale. Ambitious goals and aspirations to end plastic pollution in a treaty just don't have value on their own. The treaty must establish the policy instruments that help us to get there. One example is on the issue of virgin plastic production and use. It's clear if this continues unchecked, it will just be impossible for any of us to meet the goals of the treaty. For Unilever, we've reduced our virgin plastics footprint by 13% since 2019, but the transition remains a challenge because the economics are unbalanced. This slows down important work around transitioning to reuse and refill models, using more recycled content, and creating the business models to collect and process plastic. Global rules would help address the economic imbalance, means business can scale solutions much more quickly and efficiently. It's hugely encouraging, so thank you, to see the joint statement from the ministers of the High Ambition Coalition. We really applaud the ambition and the level shown. Governments should know that business community stands with them side by side on this ambition. Business responds well to certainty. Providing a clear long-term direction will grow investments in solutions and support sustainable business growth. This is a shared ambition within the business community. So let's make a treaty with legally binding global rules a reality. I'm now delighted to pass over to Liang Gill from Nestlé, another one of the co-chairs of the Business Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you to the High Ambition Coalition and the WWF for including us in today's meeting. We believe we cannot address plastic pollution through recycling alone. We need to cap and reduce the production of virgin plastic. We also need to focus on a circular economy to ensure that materials that are circulated remain in the economy and not end up in the environment. And we need to ensure a just transition, taking into account the human rights of all communities impacted by the full life cycle of plastics, from production to use to end-of-life management. The treaty presents an opportunity to move from voluntary best practices to mandatory international and national laws, where we don't leave environmental protection to voluntary action. The Business Coalition recently released its policy recommendations, and they cover reducing plastic production, covering circularity of existing plastics, and the prevention and remediation of micro and macro plastics. The policy paper represents the views of over 125 leading companies from around the world. Leading companies understand that the reduction in virgin plastic is key to make this pollution crisis go away. And recycling alone just can't be scaled up to what is required. We must cap and reduce our use of fossil fuel-based virgin plastic production. Otherwise, we will not be able to stay on our 1.5-degree climate pathway. At Nestlé, our climate pathway includes reducing our Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 50% in 2030 and to net zero by 2050. We also need to focus on the problematic plastic applications that can't be recycled in practice or at scale. We believe the treaty actually can benefit from a lot of the voluntary industry work that's been done already. And I'd like to give you a few examples. Nestlé, along with other companies working with the Consumer Goods Forum, defined a golden design rules for packaging, whereby we maximize the value of post-consumer packaging recycling. For example, transparent PET or closure fixtures on bottles, for example, and other packages that can be recycled. We also signed up to 12 plastic pacts. These are pacts where they ask companies to commit to negative lists of materials and additives to phase out, such as things like polystyrene, carbon black colorant, and oxidegradable plastics. Nestle also adopted voluntarily a negative list of materials to phase out. Through this action, less packaging, better packaging, and better systems, we've been able to reduce our plastic footprint from 1.5 million tons to 900,000 tons since 2019. And we've done this through redesign, material substitution, recycled content, and portfolio shifts. One particular example I'd like to share, and we've heard about single-use plastics a lot today already, is we were able to eliminate 4.5 billion plastic straws by moving them to paper. Nestle's already passed our peak virgin plastic point and our carbon peak in 2019, and we've decoupled our business growth from our plastic use. The treaty can provide, for example, a list of materials to phase out so that chemicals and pollutants that are harmful to health and the environment aren't recycled. And adopting and enforcing legally binding global rules are key to ensuring the plastics that we do use, reuse, and recycle are safe and kept out of the environment. Negotiators need to know that leading businesses are aligned with civil society on the call to decisive action now. And we also stand by ready to support governments in addressing plastic pollution with our experience and our capabilities for action. Thank you very much.
Bonjour and good afternoon. My name is Michael Goldman, and I lead policy and sustainability at the Coca-Cola Company. I'm really pleased to add my voice and our company's voice to those of my colleagues from Unilever and Nestle. You've heard about reduction, you've heard about standards. We at the Business Coalition believe this is a historic opportunity to have a global treaty, and we believe it's historic that the business community is part of the discussions from the beginning to help create a treaty that is going to be practical and actually realizable and implementable going forward. As Minister Bart-Ida mentioned, we believe this is also an opportunity to level the playing field, to create the conditions where everyone needs to join in actually implementing the vision to eliminate plastic pollution. We are supporting of the ambitious goals for the government negotiators, and we as a company have launched our own circular economy strategy that we transparently report on an annual basis, including through World Wildlife Fund's Resource Plastic and the UN Environment Ellen MacArthur Foundation Global Commitment that you heard about here previously. As part of that, we're doing work on the recyclability of our own materials that we put into the market. We're at 90% recyclable today across our portfolio, using more recycled content in our packages. We're using 15% globally today, with many markets with at least one brand in 100% recycled content today. And we're working to collect a bottle or can for every one that we use by 2030. Importantly, we believe that reuse should be a part of the global treaty. This is a critical way of transforming business models. It is the moment to incentivize and embed systemic change in how we build businesses going forward. We have set a global target to have 25% of our business in reusable packages by 2030. This means that traditional bottles that you have seen that get washed and refilled, but also new innovative dispensed and fountain solutions where consumers and customers can bring and reuse their own cups or additional cups that get reused as part of the process. We're changing our business models. Today, already more than 40 markets around the world have at least 25% of their volume in reusable packaging. We're investing in startups like municipal washing stations that would allow theaters, movie theaters, stadiums, and others to actually wash and reuse cups that consumers use. And we're investing massively with the City of Paris for next year's Paris 2024 Olympic Games to bring almost 50% of the beverages that are served in either refillable or in dispensed solutions with deposit cups that will be used by consumers there. We really salute the efforts of all the negotiators. We join in encouraging them to be ambitious in their negotiations, and we look forward to being a constructive part of the continuing process towards achieving a final draft.
Thank you so much to the business speakers. It is heartening to see, of course, the private sector coming together in such a powerful way to advocate for reduction and reuse and standardization in a global treaty. For the final section of our stakeholder remarks, we're thrilled to hear from the Scientist Coalition, the Civil Society Coalition, and the youth community. Please welcome our next three speakers to the stage. We've got Dr. Jenna Jembeck, Distinguished Professor in Environmental Engineering, a 2022 MacArthur Fellow, and the founder of the Circularity Assessment Protocol at our lab in the University of Georgia. Come on up. We've also got Dr. Shahryar Hussain, a journalist, an ecologist, and social justice advocate, as well as the Secretary General of the Environment and the Social Development Organization. Come on to the stage. And we have Miss Betty Osei Bonsu, originally from Ghana and now serving as the country manager for the Green Africa Youth Organization in Uganda. Come on up.
Okay, I'm extremely honored to have the opportunity to speak on the science of plastic pollution this afternoon. I think you'll hear that the science both echoes and amplifies messages that we've already heard. I want to first acknowledge that we've come a long way. In just the 22 years that I've been working in this space, we've gone from very little consensus of concern to agreeing to create this legally binding agreement. This is how rapidly both the salience and the science on this topic have grown. The term plastic pollution as a scientific discipline did not even exist previously either. You've witnessed the birth of this discipline, and we continue to build this body of knowledge. So what does the science currently tell us? First, we have enough data to take action. We've heard this, but this is why we're all here. The science has established that action is needed. I understand that this field feels very dynamic, and new information about toxicity, ecosystem, animal, human health impacts, and potential solutions seems to come out every week. But don't be overwhelmed. A lot of the pathways have already been illuminated. The initial step is that we must have reduction. Again, I'm echoing statements that have already been heard, but in 2020, this was established in the science with two parallel, yet completely independent studies, both published in the same issue of Science magazine, Lau et al. And Burrell et al., which was the group that I worked with. They both showed that to actually bend the curve of the at least 11 million metric tons of plastic reaching our ocean each year, we have to reduce what we're using. No waste management intervention will ever be enough. And there are example frameworks to do this. We've heard several times the unnecessary, avoidable, and problematic plastics logic can be applied in a context-sensitive way to reduce what is used. But plastics are currently tied to fossil fuels. If gases are extracted and oil is refined for things like gasoline and diesel, we will have the feedstocks for plastics in high abundance, a primary component of the economics and logistics that drive plastics production. So when we talk about reduction, we must realize that this input-push system will need to be disrupted. We also now know that plastic pollution starts at extraction and production. The fence line communities near these facilities are unjustly bearing the pollution burden. And in use, the chemicals associated with plastics, whether put in purposefully or non-intended, left over from catalysts, for example, the toxicity of many of these chemicals has been shown. Just last week, we saw that there are PFAS in the contacts that I've been putting in my eyes for 38 years. While we have numbers and data which are very important, community voices are key. So qualitative science, listening to the issues on the ground, are critical to creating an agreement that can actually be implemented successfully. And I know we heard from a few companies here today, but you might hear from others who say reduction in these changes can't be done. But it can. We have seen it before with products like treated wood that contained arsenic and now PFAS. The primary U.S. manufacturer of PFAS is completely phasing them out. And far too long, the burdens have been carried by communities and community members. Companies have the resources and the expertise to navigate what happens here and are asking, as we just heard, for the high ambition goals. So let's be ambitious. Give the world the constraints and the boundaries that the planet can handle, and companies will innovate. Our community-based work with cities is in a National Science Foundation Convergence Accelerator program that gives me hope. There's so much capacity for transformation in this cohort alone, and cities are embracing the power of data to make the decisions that work best for them. And I agree with the need for science-based targets and data transparency called for by the high ambition. We've made a lot of progress on data collection analysis and are working with the UN on harmonization. The Scientist and Scientist Coalition is here to support these negotiating efforts, so reach out to them. These solutions are often, what I see in the science of reduction is promising zero waste models, reuse systems, and alternative materials that are not fossil-based. These are a reality and can be scaled. These solutions are often more decentralized, which inherently gives us more resilience in the long run as well. And many places in the Global South are ahead in decentralized solutions. Look to them for ideas and advice because many of them are leading on zero waste and circularity. We know that systems will only change in a just and equitable way if we have representative perspectives and voices at the table. And science shows that the more diversity you have, the better and more inclusive your solutions will be. So how amazing to have so many different voices from member states, small, big, islands, north, south, listen to them all, and include the voices of Indigenous and underrepresented people, of the informal waste sector, who are some of the top experts in plastics around the world, and of women and those who are most impacted. And also local government. I love seeing all of the mayors gathering here, and those whose job it will be to implement policies and solutions. So keep being ambitious, and we'll keep building the body of knowledge and science. What an incredible opportunity you have to convene, converse, and work together to address this global crisis.
Excellencies, ministers, distinguished guests, participants, my colleague. I apologize, I'm not sitting there to talk, and I'm not comfortable to speaking on sitting. So I'm coming here so that I can express my view normally and share my experience. As a journalist, I started my career early 80s. And the plastic is now an integral part of my life. The end plastic pollution is my final goal of life. I started the work to educate and aware the people about the plastic pollution in 1982. Why? 1982, I am sure nobody think about the plastic pollution. But it comes to my mind I was in Melbourne that time. So I was working in the street and pick up some fruits, and the vendor gave me the brown bag. I was so, I'm thinking, and I'm asking, why you are giving the brown bag? I need a plastic bag. And the lady says, I don't have the plastic bag. And I'm asking why. And she replied, I heard about this material is not good. So I deliberately refused that bag and introduced this brown bag. It was kept in my mind, and I say, I'm so stupid that I don't know about the harmful effect of the plastic bag. So the journey started that time. And it was not easy. It is a long story, but within short time I cannot tell my story. Only things is I can share that I was not give up, and the many times my editor says, don't do the rubbish thing, otherwise you will lose your job. This is not the good news. So leave it, but I'm trying. I'm not giving the things. As a journalist, then as a researcher, I fully devoted on that issues and try to find what is the harm and what is the alternatives. And many of you doesn't know the Bangladesh, my country, Bangladesh is the first country to ban the plastic bag in 2002. But it was not easy. It is 13 years of struggle. It's my struggle, my organization's struggle, and other people's struggle. And then government come to front line and ban the plastic bag. I was 7-year exile for this movement in US. But I didn't give up. And I'm so happy to see the many people are coming and the plastic treaty is happening, it's going on. And if I die tomorrow, I'll be happy because you are taking the responsibility for our future nations and future generations. Come to the point of the treaty negotiation. Plastic pollution is not just the crisis of our ocean, it's not just the crisis of the waste issue. Plastic pollution, it's a chemical issue. It's an environmental health issue. Plastic pollution relate the climate. Plastic pollution relate the biodiversity, the ecosystem. If we cannot stop this, we will lose our planet. So the things is that we are just doorstep of the INC-2, and it is important to set objectives, the text of the treaty, that we have a firm commitment to what we are saying that we are meaning. I know that it is not just for the government. It is not just for the business. It is for all of us. We need to work together for a legally binding instrument. We need a treaty. We need a treaty. This must be a treaty. We don't need a convention. We need a treaty. To stop the plastic pollution, we must have a treaty. Otherwise, we cannot tackle this issue in future. So I request all of you come forward, work together, and make this commitment happen within this time frame. This is an ambitious time frame, but I still believe it is possible. I was working with the Minamata Convention very beginning, and this is an example. The Minamata Convention is a diverse convention. It's many things to address, but it's happened. So I believe that plastic treaty will be happening within this time frame, and we will be sign the diplomatic conference in 2025. And the commitment that we are given here, that we have to make it happen by 2040. But as a small person, as a journalist, I'm coming from the third world, I request all of you, rethink. We have to say something, we have to prove something by 2030. Come forward, work together for plastic treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was hoping to follow after my predecessor. The picture displayed in front of you is Uganda Waste Landfill, one of the landfills over there, and that is me just looking at that picture and having a lot of thoughts. How did it start and how has it gotten to that peak? As I contemplate on my own story depicted in this picture, I can't help but wonder about the untold stories of my future unborn children. Will they inherit a planet plagued by the consequences of an unsustainable addiction to plastic, fueled by corporate greed and government complacency? I ponder whether the leaders of our generation would rise to the challenge and address the issue of plastic pollution. The success of this endeavor hinges on the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee and its ability to craft an international, legally binding instrument on plastic pollution in the coming weeks. On the 14th to 15th of March 2023, the Break Free from Plastics organized a gathering of over 300 young people from over 80 countries in the world in partnership with more than 25 organizations, such as the Green Africa Youth Organization. The main aim of this was to collectively advocate for the adoption of a robust, legally binding treaty aimed at addressing plastic pollution that is youth inclusive, including measures to effectively stop the polluting cycles of plastics from the extraction to the production and disposal, where they cause grave and irreversible damage to our ecosystem, wildlife, and the human health. A global youth statement was produced as a result, where young people are recognizing the fact that they are the ones who will be most affected by plastic pollution, particularly those of us residing in the global south, who are already experiencing these adverse effects of climate change, plastic pollution, and biodiversity loss. The plastic pollution crisis is one of the most significant challenges that our generation and those of us ahead would need to tackle. And as such, we demand that it be given huge priority. We are calling for a global plastic treaty that would be legally binding, time-bound, and ambitious to implement a scale-up reuse, refuel, and alternative product delivery systems. These are the solutions we want to see. No more techno fixes and false solutions, such as chemical recycling, incineration. These are only perpetuating our addiction to plastics. We want to see a just transition to safer and more sustainable livelihoods for workers and communities across the plastics supply chain that is providing and holding corporate polluters responsible to the profound damages that is caused by their excessive productions of plastics. We need global leaders to stand up for this fight. We need urgent action, dramatic intervention, and systemic transformation to avert the escalating threat to human health and the accelerating breakdown of the planet's support systems. This is from the youth and for the youth. We cannot allow our planet to continue to sustain more pollution. What will be left of it for our unborn generations? We need the world to stand up and support the adoption of a robust, legally binding treaty on plastic pollution. The time for action was yesterday. No more procrastination. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, we have heard from a number of key stakeholders, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to pause and reflect. It's really powerful to hear all of these unique perspectives and that each stakeholder group holds and how we're just representing a great diverse set of folks here in the room and backgrounds. It's so profound to see the underlying common ground that we all share and that the urgency to act is now. And so, for the benefit of the rest of the, we're about to move into our closing speakers, but before we do, I'd like to share a quick few logistical reminders. If you are using an interpretation headset, please hand it back, and also the cloakroom will close at 1500. That's no longer relevant because we're way behind. Try to be swift. All right, now, to close out today's remarks, please welcome the final two speakers, Ambassador Gustavo Meza Quadra, the current INC chair, and of course, Mr. Marco Lambertini, former Director General and our current Special Envoy of WWF International. Ambassador, please go ahead.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a big pleasure to be here, very honored to see how many states, stakeholders are so committed to this treaty. We want to succeed. As chair of the INC, I think it's the best beginning of a week, a very difficult week, but I think with these very important messages you provide us, with this enthusiasm, this full set of ideas, and this commitment, this is the best way we can start this work. So thank you very much for this. I would like to start thanking the ministers of the environment of Rwanda and also Norway for the leadership. I would like to thank WWF for the organization. I would like to thank the Scientists Coalition for an effective plastics treaty, and the Business Coalition for a global plastics treaty. All of you have set the stage that we need, saying that we need sustainable consumption and production. We agree on that. Also, several stakeholders mentioned this. I think it's very important also the message that we don't have too much time. We have also received your message that this is a collective effort. We are all on this boat. Humanity is looking at us. So we only want to mention that the crisis is so big that we all know the figures. The plastics we have produced in the last 15 years represent half of the plastic we have produced from we started producing plastic. See, OECD mentioned recently in a report that if we continue this pace, in 2060 we'll triple the amount of plastic and also triple the amount of plastic that we need to fail in consider And these figures are so appalling that also are in the area of health. As you mentioned, you all mentioned, not only we have difficulties in plastic, problematic plastic, chemicals that are included in plastic, so all of this is really a challenge for us in these negotiations. I will only want to highlight that many of you mentioned several initiatives. We took note of all of them, particularly consider the whole life cycle of plastics, from extraction and production, also to the waste and as a last resort, while ensuring a just and inclusive transition for vulnerable populations, including informal waste pickers, as well as for developing countries. A transparent and inclusive process it will be the cornerstone for the agreement that needs to be as ambitious on the control measures and also on the means of implementation. I would like to stress this INC-2 will be a stepping stone in order to find a solution for the plastic problem, the problem we have of plastics. I exhort all member states to focus on rich discussions on substance, allowing for the emergencies of areas of convergence. Also, we would like a mandate for the intersectional work. This is a key element to have elements to produce a zero draft, and we hope that this will be the case. Also, we'll need to work in the fast because we don't have too much time. We want to deliver an ambitious treaty, the best possible treaty in 2024, as it is our mandate. Thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you very much for the commitment, and we look forward to seeing you on Monday, and we count on your continued support. Thank you very much.
Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm not going to speak from the podium. I'm not going to speak from sitting down because I'm so excited when I speak about plastic pollution. I need to move a little bit. And unfortunately, my team has done a great job in preparing my notes, but we're running out of time. And I'm going to leave the notes here and improvise a shorter conclusion. First of all, let me just thank everybody behind the organization of this exceptional event. Erin, Meredith, the whole team, many other people, thank you very much. The speakers, you in the audience, and many more that are online listening, and they will listen on the live stream, record the live stream later on. Super quickly, I have to say, these plastic pollution events are so exciting. And not so exciting because if on one hand, it's absolutely true, and many of you said, and there is no room for complacency here. The situation is getting worse. As we speak, pollution continues to leak into the ocean as we speak, and we know it's going to get even worse in a business-as-usual situation. If that's true, and that's the issue that we are now facing, it's also true that the journey of our society vis-à-vis plastic pollution has been astonishingly exciting over the last few years, where the growing concern in society, outraged by the scenes of beach covered in plastic, whales and seabirds starved to death because their stomach is clogged with plastic, exacerbated by the fact that now there is evidence that there's plastic in the food we eat, in the water we drink, even the air we breathe. All this together has created a reaction in a response that was, frankly, unthinkable just a few years ago. And today's event is demonstrating exactly that. The High Ambition Coalition of governments, of scientists, of businesses that you heard today is just a demonstration of a growing momentum, a growing alignment on what that ambition means. Because ambitious, we all want to be ambitious, but we need to be ambitious in a way that we deliver an agreement, a set of global rules and global standards, global actions that are able to be localized, implemented equally across the world, supported in a just and equitable transition, and also deliver the goal, the vision, that needs to be embraced by the treaty. No plastic in the environment, that means also no plastic in our own lives, bodies, and in support of the healthy future for all of us. The key elements that emerged today are many, but I would say can summarize in a few points. First of all, there is no silver bullet. In fact, we need to tackle all dimensions of plastic pollution along the whole full life cycle of the value chain of plastic. This is critical from collection, waste management, recycling, but also reduction and alternatives. And that's probably where the most difficult part of the discussion will be. The second one is that we need to acknowledge that we are producing and consuming much more plastic than we can handle. That's why it's leaking into the environment. That's why we're not able to manage it correctly. And we need to reduce the unnecessary plastic. And the third element is about another category of plastic products, the high-risk plastic that has a high probability of leakage in the environment, and plastic that once leaked does the most harm. That plastic needs to be strongly regulated with clear standards that reduce the impact. So this is the three kind of pillars, perhaps, that I heard, the three categories of key actions and requirements for an effective treaty that I heard today. And I have to say, there is a lot of work to do here. We know that. There will be resistance, there are plenty of vested interests at stake, but there is also a strong commitment to change, to embrace the systemic change that we need to see in order to really address the issue of plastic pollution. And yes, it's difficult, but look, in the last few months, we had other examples of strong global commitment that have been waiting for years and years and just happened. We had in Montreal the first global goal for nature agreed, halt and reverse nature loss by 2030, biodiversity loss. There was the High Seas Treaty approved in Kingston, again, waiting for decades. We can do it when we understand that there is a big issue, and actually solving that issue drive us towards a safe future for human generations to come and all life on Earth. We can do it. The countries of the world chose the right side of history on biodiversity and high seas in the last few months. We can do the same on plastic by the end of 2024. But that's when we need to deliver an ambitious and really transformational treaty. I have all the confidence that together we can do this. WWF, and I speak on behalf of the many other civil society organizations that are supporting this process, but particularly government and business together, this will make the difference. And I'm so excited to see these coalitions coming together today. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, everybody, for your leadership. And onwards, because there is work to do, but at the end of 2024, we will have a strong and ambitious treaty to beat plastic pollution. Thank you very much.